Welcome back to Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. We're going to take a look at the second half of the verse. And if you recall from the prior video, verse 4, but also some of the preceding verses, introduce the very famous issue of the Nephilim, or the giants. And so we had them introduced in the last video. Now we're going to get an explanation as to sort of where they came from, how that connects back to verse 3, and so on. So let's begin by reading, and then we'll make some comments. Hos an eseperuanta hoi huioi tu theou. Prostas thugateras ton anthropon, ke egenosan heautois, ekenoi esan, hoi gigantes, hoi ap ionas, hoi anthropoi, hoi anomastoi. Well, we begin with this transition, which with this indefinite on here plus the host, I would probably translate this as whenever. And then we have eseperuanta, which is going to be from eis peruamai, with that anta ending and an e, past time indicator. This is a third plural imperfect middle indicative. And the subject would be the sons of God. This points us back to Genesis 6, verse 3. And recall that is also debated as to who exactly they are. But whenever the sons of God were going into, and of course that's in a way of intimacy, if you will, pros, so to the daughters, thugateros, ton anthropon, which again, that's part of the debate here as to who those people are, and I'll get into that more in a future video. And kai egenosan, so that's from genao. Notice the double N's. This is the word for beget or produce offspring. This is some strange morphology. I was looking into it. This only happens one other time in the Septuagint. This, even though it looks like an aorist ending, this is actually typically parsed as a third plural imperfect active indicative. With an E on the front end as well. So they were begetting to themselves children by implication. So essentially what the author here is doing, and the translator speaking up on this nicely, is that whenever these sons of God are having intimate relations with the daughters of men, they are producing offspring for themselves. And then we find out it's those ones, that is these offspring, that were, that's the imperfect form of me, it's plural, hoi gigantes, and so we saw that in the prior video, the giants, the gigas there. Now you might expect, and I certainly would have expected, that the Masoretic text in this case would also read Nephilim, and if you want to see the different options for that, you can go back to the prior video. But instead, what we have in the Hebrew is gibborim, so this would be, warrior or something like that. The Vulgate has potentes as opposed to gigantes, that we saw for Genesis 6, 4a. And so it's interesting that both of these are essentially referring to strong warrior type people as opposed to giants. So this Septuagint translator uses the same word that we saw prior in the verse, but we don't see Nephilim or something like that in the Semitic tradition like I would expect. So either way, he's saying that the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men are these giants who were from, and Ionas here is interesting, from antiquity, from the age, from a long time ago, something to that effect. And he goes on to say these were the men who were renowned. Notice this would be an attributed position after the article, so it's the renowned men or the famous men that are these giants. So that leaves us with the very interesting question, who exactly are they? What were the different theories? Who were the Nephilim? Well, I'm going to try to answer that in a special Saturday edition, so stay tuned for that. But hopefully that has whet your appetite a bit to understand more about this very interesting issue in the history of interpretation of Genesis. So we'll take a look at that in more detail in a different video. Thanks a lot.